Well-Trained Mind Press presents The Lion of the North, written by G.A. Henty, read by Jim Weiss.
Preface by G.A. Henty. My dear lads, you are nowadays called upon to acquire so great a mass of learning and information in the period of life between the ages of 12 and 18, that it is not surprising that but little time can be spared for the study of the history of foreign nations. Most lads are, therefore, lamentably ignorant of the leading events of even the most important epochs of continental history, although, as many of these events have exercised a marked influence upon the existing state of affairs in Europe, a knowledge of them is far more useful, and, it may be said, far more interesting, than that of the comparatively petty affairs of Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes. Prominent among such epochs is the 30 Years' War, which arose from the determination of the Emperor of Austria to crush out Protestantism throughout Germany. Since the invasion of the Huns, no struggle which has taken place in Europe has approached this in the obstinacy of the fighting and the terrible sufferings which the war inflicted upon the people at large. During these 30 years, the population of Germany decreased by nearly a third, and in some of the states, half the towns and 2/3 of the villages absolutely disappeared. The story of the 30 Years' War is too long to be treated in one volume. Fortunately, it divides itself naturally into two parts. The first begins with the entry of Sweden under her chivalrous monarch, Gustavus Adolphus, and terminates with his death and that of his great rival, Wallenstein. This portion of the war has been treated in the present story. The second period begins at the point when France assumed the leading part in the struggle, and concluded with the peace which secured liberty of conscience to the Protestants of Germany. This period I hope to treat some day in another story, so that you may have a complete picture of the war. The military events of the present tale, the battles, sieges, and operations, are all taken from the best authorities, while for the account of the special doings of Mackay's, afterwards Monro's, Scottish regiment, I am indebted to Mr. J. Grant's Life of Sir John Hepburn. Yours sincerely, G.A. Henty. Chapter 1. The Invitation. It was late in the afternoon in the spring of the year 1630. The hilltops of the south of Scotland were covered with masses of cloud. A fierce wind swept the driving rain before it with such force that it was not easy to make way against it. It had been raining for 3 days without intermission. Every little mountain burn had become a boiling torrent, while the rivers had risen above their banks and flooded the lowlands in the valleys. The shades of evening were closing in, when a lad of some 16 years of age stood gazing across the swollen waters of the Nith, rushing past in turbid flood. With his lowland bonnet pressed down over his eyes, and his plaid wrapped tightly round him, he stood on a rising hummock of ground at the edge of the flood. "If they are not here soon," he said to himself, "they will not get across the Nith tonight. None but bold riders could do so now, but by what Uncle says, Captain Hugh must be that and more. Ah, here they come." As he spoke, 2 horsemen rode down the opposite side of the valley and halted at the water's edge. The prospect was not a pleasant one. The river was 60 or 70 feet wide, and in the center the water swept along in a raging current. "You cannot cross here," the boy shouted at the top of his voice. "You must go higher up." The wind swept his words away, but his gestures were understood. "The boy is telling us to go higher up," said one of the horsemen. "I suppose he is," the other replied. "But here is the ford. The road we have traveled ends here, and I can see it again on the other side. It is getting dark, and were we to cross higher up, we might lose our way. It is years since I was here." The lad, seeing the hesitation of the horsemen, ran along the bank up the stream, and to their surprise, when he had gone a little more than 100 yards, dashed into the water.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?